What do I think about Mortal Kombat 11 6 months after launch? Stick around and find out. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chamber of the Wraith. My name is Brian, and today we're going to perform another Wraith Reviews thingy-majiggy. The thing is, however, is that this is actually kind of interesting because it's A, reviewing a game 6 months after launch, and B, probably one of the most important key games in my gaming career so far. What I mean by that is that this is probably the game more than any that has taught me many of the lessons that I have learned about games and how AAA companies work and all of that stuff. So I decided I'm going to review, and do my best to review, Mortal Kombat 11 6 months later. A couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, this is going to be big. Raw B-roll footage alone, it's going to be 75 minutes. By the end of it, I wouldn't be surprised if it crossed 80, if I got to be completely honest. So, if you want to skip to the end to get my final overall thoughts, click here in order to get to that point. Unless you, basically, this is your TLDR link, so don't miss out. A bit of a shame that annotations don't exist in YouTube anymore, otherwise this would be literally perfect. But number two, I did intend on having this come out yesterday, but things happened and now it's coming out hopefully today. And finally, I fully intended on talking more about the changes in Mortal Kombat 11, like how things have changed. So I'm going to double check the footage just to be sure, but if nothing really happens, but if I don't talk about any of the major changes that happened to the game so far, you'll see my face again talking about said changes. And if I talked about enough about the changes, or I decide to put this elsewhere, let's just jump into the B-roll and talk Mortal Kombat 11 my likes, because there are some likes, and the things I did not like so much, and maybe a little announcement at the end as well. Don't forget to be awesome, folks, and let's jump on in. Mortal Kombat 11. This has got to be one of the most important and one of the most controversial Mortal Kombats to date among the fan base, for all kinds of reasons. In fact, when I was doing some of the things I found while I was doing some digging were quite interesting. Mortal Kombat 11 topped sales up until September, and the game launched in April. It took until NBA 2K20 to dethrone it, and it still made second place in September. Sales numbers for October aren't quite available yet, but I can't imagine that anything less would happen, would befall this particular franchise. But there's an interesting sentiment for this game. Critics give the PS4 version, which I play, an 84 on Metacritic. However, the viewer score, the general score, is 3.2 out of 10, which is pretty bad. Why is that? Well, not only is, there's quite a few reasons for it, and for the record, my personal look at Mortal Kombat 11 is, it's alright. It's not my favorite Mortal Kombat game, but it does stuff right. It's not total garbage. But there's a few things that I think if I were to describe Mortal Kombat 11 in one sentence, it's a game with great potential marred by AAA development. I think that's the best way for me to look at it. There's a lot here that should be really good for Mortal Kombat.
Scorpion.
Customizable loadouts for every character with different moves to make them feel different in gameplay. A pretty respectable roster, even at launch. So if we discount Shang Tsung, Nightwolf, Shao Kahn, and the Terminator, we still have quite the interesting roster with characters that have interesting gimmicks to them that allow them to stand out from the rest of the roster. And in the past, we have time-traveling characters, an outworld tax collector with 6 arms, and the first female playable god, much less an elder goddess, much less a relative of Shinnok. And we've seen a pretty interesting take on Frost, who used to be seen as just a Sub-Zero wannabe from Deadly Alliance, now has unique features about her and is like extreme cyberpunk shenanigans. Excuse me, still working off my sickness a little bit. However, the cast falls short in quite a few spots in my opinion. Mainly that up to a quarter of the launch roster ultimately feels unnecessary, in my opinion. 5 of the characters here are family members, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but considering that Mortal Kombat 11's roster is 24, and it's probably one of the safest rosters in Mortal Kombat history, I could stand to have seen some more risks taken. Personally, I think Mileena should not have been the only character to have been cut. Now, of course, this might, Mileena fans could take what I'm saying the wrong way, and being like, oh, I want a Mileena gone. I didn't. Mileena is a very distinct character, and she is definitely a fan favorite, and she's from Outworld. So, and I think with the custom variation shenanigans, I think she could be a very interesting character to have. However, what I meant to say is that this roster plays too safe with who it has on it. Now, in my personal opinion, 3 newcomers is perfect. It's enough flexibility to let characters be changed, and we basically see what kind of ideas can be done with a new character. Gears is a perfect example of that. He's a character with a very unique gimmick in that he can control time and uses time manipulation, and some of his moves reflect that. Same with Cetrion. She uses many elemental abilities, which, while we've seen other characters use fire and other characters use water, we haven't seen a character use all of that combined with earth and wind. So it's the amount of tools that she has. And Collector is just straight up a new race. So new races are always welcome. Although I personally wouldn't have minded if it turned out Collector was not from Outworld, but maybe some sort of Chaos Roamer or something. I don't know. But that then leads to the rest of the cast. As far as cast members go, over half of them are mainstays from the first trilogy. We have 12, I'm just doing a quick count right now, 12, 13, 14, 15 of the 24 launch characters being classics. That, in my opinion, is a little bit too much, and I think it could have stood to get chopped down. By the way, this is going to be a really long video, so fair warning. If you didn't see the timescale, this is going to run for a little while, because I got quite a few things on my mind about it. Both good and bad for Mortal Kombat 11. But right now we're just talking part 1, I guess, the roster. And frankly, and not to mention that we have not 1, not 2, but 6 of the NRS-era newcomers. Scarlet is very welcome because she was only DLC in MK9, and she hasn't had a launch playable roster appearance to date until now. Aaron Black, Devora, Kotal Khan, Jackie Briggs, and Cassie Cage all made appearances in MKX. There were 5 of the 8 newcomers, and in my opinion, Mortal Kombat X had too many newcomers. Had just a few too many newcomers. I liked them all, but I personally feel that it may have been a bit too much for a roster its size. If it was 8 newcomers on a 32 character roster, I think that would have been better. But we got 8 newcomers on a 24 character roster, so that made things complicated. And I can see why in MKX they kept Kenshi, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Jax, and Kung Lao with their descendants or relatives, because, well, these are the new guys. They're new, and it makes sense to have them around. I don't think that's truly necessary anymore. I think from now on, in my personal opinion, we should be seeing a compromise. I don't want to see 3 cages on a roster anymore. If I were to see, the way I see it, it's like this. Jax and Jackie could feasibly switch back and forth. And honestly, I was expecting Jax not to make Mortal Kombat 11. I would have thought he would have retired and stayed out of the fight. Which, personally, as a fan of Jax, I think I would be fine with that. Jax has been through a lot. He deserves retirement, man. Let Jackie Breaks take over. At least for one game, in my opinion. Let Jax take a break. Let Jackie take over. Already, that frees up 1 slot. Cassie is interesting. She's a blend of both Johnny and Sonya. And she takes a lot from both of them. Nut punches, glow kicks, military tech. This could have been a game where, really, if they really wanted to take risks, both of these old heads would be gone. Or one of them would be gone, really. And honestly, that old head that could have been gone could have and probably should have been Sonya. And I'm not saying that because Ronda Rousey voices Sonya. I think Sonya Blade, as much of a classic as she is, and as much of a veteran as she is, I think should have stood to been removed from the game at least once to let her daughter shine. Imagine, if you will, and this is going to be spoiler alert for the storyline of Mortal Kombat 11 for the first chapter. Sonya Blade dies right at the beginning of Mortal Kombat 11. She gets killed. And what I think should have happened is that death gets to both Johnny and Cassie. Johnny maybe decides to step it up and becomes more of a military man, whereas Cassie realizes that being a commanding officer is being a commanding officer is no joke, and she maybe even takes that role even more seriously. You know what I mean? Just a little bit of character development that could have sprouted from Sonya not being on the roster at all and staying dead. But because they played it incredibly safe with this roster, we didn't get that. In my humble opinion, when it comes to Mortal Kombat characters, there should be only 4 characters that should be guarantees on the roster. Raiden, Liu Kang, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero. Everybody else, in my opinion, should be fair game to step out for a game or two, if it means mixing up the roster a little bit. Mortal Kombat 11 now has, or Mortal Kombat as a series has 80 characters now, of its own. And some of these characters we've not seen in over a decade. So, in my personal opinion, and in the opinion of several others that I have spoken to about this, I think it might be time for Mortal Kombat to switch gears a little bit and maybe see some old heads go and some of the older 3D era heads come back. And in my personal opinion, looking at this roster, I can tell you right now which characters I would drop and who I would replace them with. Keeping in mind, these will only be characters. These will absolutely only be characters who have had a history with Mortal Kombat. No new character concepts or anything like that, or DLC or whatever. In my personal opinion, these characters did not need to be in here. And spoiler alert, one of them is actually one of the newcomers. Sonya didn't need to be in Mortal Kombat 11. Nor did, I think Sonya Blade, Jax, Kano, and Collector should have been turfed from the roster. Now, I did just say that Collector is an interesting character, and he is. But in the terms of the story mode, which again we will get into, he played the role, his role being allied to Shao Kahn and filling him in on what happened since his death, could have probably gone to another character. Imagine, if you will, that Tanya sees the timeline disturbance and sees Shao Kahn is back and decides, to save my own hide, I'm going to temporarily ally with Shao Kahn while he's still around. And then fills him in on what's going on, because her enemy is Kotal. And knowing that Shao and Kotal are enemies, she can play that to her advantage. So, having Tanya on the launch roster instead of Collector probably could have benefited the story and made some level of sense. And make Tanya fans happy, which there's a notable contingent of. Kano, this is full-blown bias in my opinion. This is admittedly pretty full-blown bias. I can't stand Kano as a character. Which I suppose is a good thing, because if I can't stand him, he's done his job. Fair. But the guy has been running around for too long. Really, he should have been killed by now. By somebody. He's stabbed too many people in the back. Really, I thought he would have died in Mortal Kombat X. If he died in Mortal Kombat X, I would have been okay with that, in my opinion. And had he died in MKX and not appeared in MK11, I would be 100% cool with that. And replacing Kano, I would have liked to have seen a red dragon in here instead, whether that be Mavado or Dagon. And then maybe, this is just a little bit of hypotheticalness here, but suppose that Cabal slips. Let's say Cabal from the past shows up as a black dragon with his speed powers potentially explained somehow, and realizes that Kano is dead in this timeline, so he takes over as head of the Black Dragon. And let's say Dagon or Mavado show up, and there's a gang war. How cool would that be if we saw a Black Dragon, Red Dragon gang war brewing in the Fight Club, which was one of the better scenes in Mortal Kombat 11's story, in my opinion. Excuse me. But moving right along. Sonya is a bit tricky because, as I said, the reason why I think she doesn't need to be here is because we have too much Cage. We can arguably get rid of Johnny, but for this scenario, I'm just going to say Johnny Cage sticks around. It makes sense. He's, kind of funny. But Cassie has a little bit of that humor too. So, just for this argument, let's say Sonya doesn't make it in the game. Just for whatever reason, Sonya doesn't make it. Here, I think, could be a really cool opportunity to get... Excuse me for a second. It would be hard to say who could replace Sonya Blade, but I think Mortal Kombat X's favorite combat kid could easily have taken her spot. Takeda. Now, the fact that Takeda's not in Mortal Kombat 11 is baffling. Same with Kung Jin, actually. As de facto protagonists of the story, the combat kids, as a unit, should have been together. Why they got split up exactly, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure whether it was due to cuts, which we can get into that one maybe later on, but whether it's due to cuts, due to time, or whatever reason, Takeda and Kung Jin did not make it in Mortal Kombat 11. Which is a bit of a shame. So I personally think that those two, Takeda and Kung Jin, should have replaced Jax and Sonya for this game. Now, yes, that would mean that that would literally mean that every single Mortal Kombat X character except for Ferritor would come back. But as much of a fan as I am of Ferritor, I really think that Ferritor is best. It kind of sucks that Ferritor got into the jobber role, and because of that, that means if we want Ferritor in here, we'd have to drop one of the jobber or one of the jobber people, like Baraka, Noob Saibot. Like, I know Baraka's not even that much of a jobber in Mortal Kombat 11. He actually has a halfway decent story arc here. But like Baraka, Noob Saibot, Frost, really, we gotta be completely honest. Nobody else here. If Ferritor were to say replace Kung Lao, then that would hurt the roster more than it would help. So Ferritor unfortunately would have to get the boot, but that's what I think should have happened to this roster. What I think should have happened is that Jax is just based off of story reasons, and if you probably picked up on it, that's mainly what I'm basing this on. Jax retires, Sonya dies, Kano is dead, and Collector just doesn't exist. And then from there, we get Tanya, who fills in Collector's role perfectly. We get Movado. I'm going to use Movado for this example, because I think bringing in Dagon would be a little bit of too heavy hitting right now. Because Dagon was part of the Armageddon story. He was the bad guy basically after Onaga. So, and if you're gonna have Dagon, you need to have Taven, and I'm sticking to the same size character roster, so better to have Movado in here. Movado acting as co-head of the Red Dragon alongside Dagon. He starts a war with Cabal, who is the new head of the Black Dragon since Kano's death. What have you. That's basically what I think should have happened. And that way we get 2 3D era characters on the launch roster, Frost and Movado. And I think Movado, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Movado made his first appearance in Deception, which would mean that he was the first Deception debuting character to make a playable appearance in a 3D era game. Excuse me. Yes. Anyhow. So, roster-wise, overall, the game plays it very safe, and I'm going to probably give it a 6.5 out of 10, if I'm going to be completely honest. It plays it really safe and makes some very odd decisions with who they omitted, and the fact that originally, I did some digging, and I found some interesting information, that supposedly Shinnok and Mileena were supposed to be on the launch roster, but got cut at the last minute. They got the Static Shock treatment from Mortal Kombat 11, and Mileena being cut seems to have backfired pretty considerably. I mean, you look at any of the discussions about Mortal Kombat on Twitter, and what do you get but a whole bunch of fighting back and forth about Mileena should have been in the game. No, Mileena sucks. Blah 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 blah. Fuck, I hate that. But we're not here to talk about Mileena. We're here to talk about Mortal Kombat 11, 6 months after launch. Which means, since it's been 6 months after launch, we should probably talk about the DLC additions to the roster. Shao Kahn is a pre-order bonus, so he doesn't really count, but the concept of the pre-order bonus is my views on the gaming industry, probably should say, have begun to evolve considerably. Since I've been made privy to some of the articles and some of the stories and checking things out and all of that. And one of the big ones is that the pre-order bonus is, when you think about it, kind of scummy. So, and they made Shao Kahn said pre-order bonus. So, I mean, I'm not anti-pre-order bonus, but it's a bit weird that they made Shao Kahn the pre-order bonus when, and they've done this. They've made boss-type characters like Darkseid and Goro pre-order bonuses before, but I don't know. That just seems really odd. That's definitely a WB decision, but again, we'll get to that later. Suffice it to say, though, Shao Kahn it's really nice to have a playable Shao Kahn for the first time in a really long time. It's just a shame that he was basically a pre-order bonus, or you had to buy him. So it's essentially kind of a weird DLC situation. Ugh. Anyway. Back on track, especially since he's the first pre-order bonus to appear in the story mode. If he didn't appear in the story mode, I think I would feel less weird about Shao Kahn being the pre-order bonus, you know what I mean? Back on track. Shang Tsung is the first DLC character. Fantastic. I love Shang Tsung in the sense that he is the best he's the best kind of villain. He's a puppet master, behind the scenes, charismatic, low tone, but no less menacing villain. And Shang Tsung as DLC makes perfect sense. Plus, he's voiced and has the facial scanning done by Kerry Tagawa. So he's ultimate fan service. So he's pretty solid as DLC. My favorite DLC to have been revealed thus far, though, is actually Nightwolf. Nightwolf was one of my favorite characters from Mortal Kombat 9, and he's really fun and awesome to play as in Mortal Kombat 11. In fact, he was the character that I co-mained with Kotal Khan for the longest time. If you've ever seen Wraith Online, he's been around the second longest alongside Kotal. But and really, it's cool that they made him human instead of the Revenant base, because technically he's a Revenant right now. But I'm happy that they made him human from the start as DLC. And we'll talk about maybe a little bit about that later, since as I'm recording, we're almost we are a little over 4 weeks away, a little over a month away until Sindel drops. So maybe we'll get to her later. The Terminator. This is our first DLC character, our DLC guest character. And usually I'm on board with guest characters. But this is what I mean by this being one of the most important and controversial and bizarre Mortal Kombats to date. I don't feel one way or the other overall for the guest characters. Terminator is okay, neat, makes sense. He's got a movie coming out. Do I care that he appears to have reused some of the moves from Jason? No, it makes perfect sense. He's like Jason. The Terminator is a stiff, unstoppable killing machine, so it makes sense that he has similarly direct, stiff, grappling attacks. I feel like they could have done a little bit more with the Terminator, though. Mainly in the sense that he has a shotgun, he has grenades, and he has his machine gun. I would have loved it if they implemented more weapons somehow. Maybe made him into a zoner with one variation, with perhaps a chain gun, like in Terminator 2, for example. But either way, the Terminator turned out alright. As far as guest characters go, he's kind of like Jason Voorhees. Not just in animation and everything, but how I feel about him in being in the game. He's cool, and I know there's fans of him, but me personally, he doesn't have the same vibe. He doesn't have the same attractive vibe that Alien, Predator, and Kratos have. You know what I mean? They're not characters that I think, oh my god, how amazing would it be to see them in Mortal Kombat, and then they're in Mortal Kombat. Now, we don't have them on screen yet, but we won't have them for some time yet. But talking on characters, Cassie Quinn here is the perfect segue towards probably my least anticipated character for the entire Kombat pack. And that would be the Joker. Why? Okay, well, I know why. Because the Joker had a movie that came out not too long ago. Sure. But we know for a fact that Ash Williams was supposed to be on the DLC roster. But he got shunted off for the Joker, and that wasn't a decision actively made by WB. Because, well, we know for sure that the scheduling conflicts were caused by WB, but honestly, there's like a 90% chance that that's there. The reason for that is they want to promote the Joker movie, and doubly promote the Birds of Prey movie that's coming out February next year. And with the Joker coming out at the end of December for us Kombat Pack owners, and coming out right before Birds of Prey is supposed to drop for normal players, Joker, in a sense, acts as the perfect segue for advertising both a Blu-ray Christmas release for the Joker movie and for the Birds of Prey movie that is going to star Harley Quinn. And the reason why we have that Cassie Quinn skin is for some reason they paired it up with the Terminator, but I digress. The Joker, to me, it's weird. We joked about, me and a few buddies of mine have joked that Mortal Kombat vs. DC 2 is probably going to happen, but at this rate, honestly, I would not be surprised if it actually did. The thing about the Joker and why I'm really not looking forward to him is, A, I personally think that the Joker is a little bit too much everywhere. I mean, there's a reason for that. There's Joker fans everywhere. It makes perfect sense that Joker's like, you know, literally everywhere and is so popular. And I'm not gonna bash anybody for liking the Joker. And I mean, I'm not even exactly hating on the Joker. It's just that I was burned when Injustice 2 came out and I found out that Joker was a launch character. And even more burned when I played through the story mode of that game and found out that Joker had less story involvement in that game than literally any other launch roster character. then Brainiac, then Batman, then Superman, then Harley Quinn, then fucking Captain Cold. Joker had less of a story involvement. He was just there to make a cameo and prop up Harley Quinn, which, good on them. The Harley Quinn from the Injustice universe is fantastic. However, I personally think that NetherRealm should have booted Joker from the launch roster and made him DLC. As a matter of fact, I can even see it where what they could have done is they could have maybe gotten Starfire or Red Hood, or even Static Shock, and finish them, put him in there, and have him, or them, sorry, be a part of the story, and then have the first fighter pack be Sub-Zero, Joker, and one other character. Seeing that the Joker ended up at the combat pack and replaced Ash Williams kind of left me feeling off. This is going to be one of those ranty videos as well, so hope you understand that. But I do not have very high hopes for the Joker. In my honest opinion, what I think is going to happen as well is because of the last minute, oh, we want Joker in this fighter pack, or in this combat pack. Let's go. Let's do it. Joker is probably going to be an Injustice 2 clone. I would not be surprised if most of his movements came from Injustice 2 in one form or another. How else are you going to make it happen that quickly? I mean, granted, sure, we had since August 13th at least, let's say the move occurred, or August 21st was when that trailer came out, so let's say we had since mid-July to make the Joker. That is quite a bit of time, of almost 5 months to about 5.5 months to get him out. Okay. But generally speaking, they seem to work on characters 1 or 2 at a time. We know that it seems to be 2 at a time because Ed Boon recently tweeted out that he saw a previous version of the Joker's Fatal Blow and was impressed. But we know that Sindel is next. Hell, there's a recent PlayStation Plus notification that showed that Sindel is going to drop on the 26th. And we could be expecting trailers from Sindel in a couple of weeks. Which means, furthermore... One sec. Sorry, I was adjusting my microphone levels. Now I should be a little more audible. Anyway, as I was saying, if they are working on 1 or 2 characters at a time, and we just know about the previous stuff as of maybe a couple of days ago, then that means that it takes Mortal Kombat NetherRealm probably a couple of months to develop a character, which makes sense. Makes sense for them to develop characters for a couple of months, create their concept arts, their gear and everything, how it's going to look, and then animate them, and then add textures. It's a process to make these characters, so it takes a long time. And I don't want to assume too much, but given that Joker was basically last minute addition to this combat pack, it would make perfect sense to make the Joker an Injustice 2 clone, or at the very least take a lot from Injustice 2 in order to save time on the animation front, thus allowing the Joker to come out on time despite whatever work may have already been done on Ash Williams, who we know was supposed to be in this combat pack but basically got the boot. And as for the other 2 characters, Spawn is the only guest character I actually have a vested interest in. He is the one that people have been requesting since Mortal Kombat X. People want Spawn. And hey, Todd McFarlane's edgelord baby is perfect for Mortal Kombat, so bring him on in. Bring him on in. I mean, through Injustice 2 I learned about Hellboy, and now I've got... What do I got? I got Seed of Destruction, the complete short stories, The Wild Hunt, and... I can't read that. Hellboy in Hell. By Mike Mignola, because of Injustice 2 making me interested in Hellboy. So maybe they could do the same thing for Spawn, and that would be awesome. And as for Sindel, who's coming up next, she's my least favorite of the Mortal Kombat characters. But she's ahead of the Joker, and quite frankly is kind of tied with the Terminator. Cool, she's in. Fantastic, fans are going to be happy. Not my cup of tea, but it's nice to see that she's going to be in, despite her bio being a rather interesting take on the fact that we're gonna basically get evil Sindel pre-Mortal Kombat Deception, basically post Earthrealm Sacrifice and pre Mind Control Break. So Sindel is still gonna be evil in this one, and I'm not keen on that. I want to see good Sindel again, but we're gonna have to wait and see on that. Her default skin is the Revenant one, though, so that's gonna be fun. Now, I've been talking about characters for God knows how long, so let's move on to the next part of this sort of review thing. Let's talk gameplay. Let's talk about the gameplay loop and the things that you do in Mortal Kombat 11. Frankly, as somebody who plays this game a lot and tries to play it about as much as I do Injustice 2, when I used to play Injustice 2 back in the day, I'm sorry to say, no. That is not the case. You have your, so I'll just break, story mode is going to get its own main thing, but let's break it down. We got a 12 chapter story mode. We have the Towers of Time, which is a weaker multiverse. They only recently made it so that there were more towers available, and they keep adding new towers and things, which is nice, but there's fewer platforms, and they refresh. I feel slower overall because we have a 12-hour, a 24-hour, a 3 or 4 day one with the Premier Towers. I feel like this is I think this is also 12 hours normally, but it can be upwards of a week before this particular thing refreshes. The Rapid Towers, which come and go every hour or 2 hours, and then the Tag Assist Towers that hang out every 3 hours. And then your Summon Towers, which this is very cool, that you can get these keys to summon towers in order to get rewards and such. And then your Gauntlet, which I have my personal feelings on. As fucking ridiculous as this Gauntlet is, I really want there to be the option to be able to replay the Gauntlet. I want, think about the Challenge Tower back in Mortal Kombat 9. 300 challenges, and you can play through all of them. And then pick and choose which ones you want to play again. Do you want to play Challenge 269, where you're Striker against 3 Shao Kahns in a row? You can. Do you want to play Challenge 300, where you as one character, the character of your choice by the way, have to beat Goro, Kintaro, Melina, and Shao Kahn on 1 health bar while buffs are being tossed around? You want that? You got that. You can play through that. The Gauntlet, which is 30 stages, had a lot of fun, interesting, and quite frustrating challenges all the way through, including stage 30, which fuck this one. But the thing that grinds my gears is that once you're done the Gauntlet, you're done. You don't get to play the Gauntlet challenges anymore. And this single change, making any of the Gauntlet challenges playable, if I want to play Challenge 15, if I want to play Challenge 10, or 20, or 1, or 30, if I want to try and speed run Challenge 30, let us have the ability to do that. And by doing that, you've increased the replayability of the Towers of Time fucking tenfold, man. 20-fold. Because you get to play through more of these towers with unique mechanics. You don't have to let the rewards also be very high anymore. You don't have to give 200 time crystals every time. We're going to talk about those time crystals as well. You don't have to give us 200 time crystals every time you beat this thing. You could just give us consumables. I mean, I have a fuckload of them already, but just give us consumables or crypt resources or currencies or augments for the rewards. Your standard tower frame. Maybe allow us more tower keys for beating towers under a certain time in the Gauntlet. Just by letting the Tower Gauntlet be replayable and even allowing relatively meager rewards, letting the main reward being, I want to speedrun stage 30 on the gauntlet. There you go. That's how you increase your replayability for this craziness by crazy amounts. And I want to compare this to Multiverse in Injustice 2 for a second, because I feel like that's incredibly important. So we're actually going to switch games and talk about Injustice 2's Multiverse mode and what it does right compared to what Mortal Kombat 11's Towers of Time does wrong. Welcome to the multiverse. This is a much better version of the towers that I was talking about, and I'll explain why. Normally, this Earth right here is not available, but it's available because it has, well, because it's Halloween. It's the event. It's basically the events multiverse. Halloween, Christmas, holidays, television premieres, what have you. You go here for that, and it only shows up during that, and then it disappears. Now, the fact that the Earth count is actually somewhat dynamic. Usually, it's 5 Earths, and then the battle simulator. Is it 5? No, it's actually usually 6. But now there's 7. Compared, if you look back to the Towers of Time, and functionally speaking, it's 5 or 6 towers if you've beaten the gauntlet, and 6 if you count the summonable towers. The Tagesis Tower, the Premier Tower, the Rapid Tower, I forget what the oh yeah, character towers as well. That's another one, but character towers are a bit weird. So I guess there is the same amount of runs technically for Injustice, but as Injustice. But unlike Mortal Kombat 11, you're never locked off unless it's something like this, where, let's say, I don't know, you want to go in here for the Hellboy gear, and we're gonna actually do that. I'm just gonna go AI because I don't have the patience to deal with this shit right now. You go in here, and this one sort of Earth will unlock. It's, I don't know what to call it exactly, but it refreshes every 6 hours. So every 6 hours it refreshes, and that's basically it. But you get some really good rewards. And this is Injustice 2, a fighting game with loot boxes, for fuck's sake!
Another girl's always a good thing. This other girl wants to eat your soul. You're gonna go home hungry.
Alright, now moving on. Now, the thing to note about these multiverses is that the challenges can at least be a little bit interesting. You have to deal with things like temporary armor, you get assists. You don't get your own modifiers, so there isn't a way to basically cheat the system. And yes, I'm letting the AI deal with it because it lets me focus on talking. But it just feels weird that an older game has the more fun towers, and given how this fight's going, I'll probably just cut to the end in order to talk more. Now, as I was saying, these towers inherently feel more rewarding because of the nature of the rewards that you get from these towers. You're guaranteed to get gear, and in the right towers, you're guaranteed to get really high quality mother boxes. Now, granted, again, these are loot boxes. However, as far as loot boxes go, and you know how far they go, it's weirdly not the worst loot box thing, but that really puts it in perspective. Anyway, so this is the only... and they'll tell you when you can only complete a certain event X amount of times. So, can only be completed once, can't play it anymore, gotta wait 2.5 hours for it to recharge. But in the meantime, I could play any of these challenges any amount of times I want to. I could play here as many times as I want to in order to grind out things, in order to just play the game. Yeah, I could come here to play. I could do the holiday tower when it's around, and if it's not around, I've got character-specific towers that give character-specific gear. I've got 10 hours left on Sub-Zero, actually. I might do that. And I've got about a day and a half left on Poison Ivy. So there's stuff here, and these are character-specific. These are like the character towers in Mortal Kombat 11. But because the rewards in Mortal Kombat 11 are limited, I can see why the character towers are... they don't have unlimited replayability, but every other tower should have unlimited replayability. The Gauntlet should. The summonable tower should. And the thing about this is that this isn't the only sort of multiverse thing that we can do. Suppose that you are online, and suppose that you have access to a guild. Why don't we, say, pop in here. Oh look, there's a weekly multiverse for you if you're so inclined to play with a guild in order to unlock more stuff. And truly, this, for whatever reason, Injustice 2's multiverse, despite the fact that there isn't a single hour multiverse and you can't really summon your own multiverse, there's more to do, and it's more fun. Why that is, I have no... why they took the step back with Mortal Kombat 11, I have no idea. But they really should have... what they should have done is they should have taken your 6 main multiverses, 7 if you count Holiday, and made it 10 different kinds of towers. Character towers, summonable towers, the towers that we already have, plus a few others that are unique. Maybe... I don't know, let's say augment mining, for one, if you want to mine for augments specifically. Soul towers. Assist ones instead of tag ones, or split tag and assist, so you have tag towers and assist towers. And there you go. Multiverse just feels more fun. And Injustice 2 feels more fun than Mortal Kombat 11, and that's probably one of the weirder things about it. Despite so many similarities, right up to and including an AI battle simulator to mine for rewards, Injustice just feels more fun, and I'm not totally sure why it's going in the downward direction. But we should probably move on to the next part. Okay, back at it, and quite frankly, sick of talking about Towers of Time. So let's try and move on to Classic Towers, which is its own mode. But this is weird. They made it its own mode, but it's basically the same as Injustice 2 again. You have 5 rungs, 8 rungs, 12 rungs, Endless, and Survivor. Nothing too fancy in Classic Towers here, folks. And what I really would have liked is if we go back to Injustice 1, which I'm not going to actually put in this video, but I'll just tell you, in Injustice 1, you had 24 different battle types. You had essentially 24 different classic tower types. You had take on 10 opponents in order to get your true ending and beat evil Superman. You had villains only, heroes only, poisoned, survivor, ultimate survivor, ensemble, try and beat the entire cast of Injustice. And impossible! Try and beat the entire cast of Injustice on 1 health bar! Again, a reduction, not an increase. And this I know, and I did say earlier that I wasn't quite sure why that is. But honestly, I think I do know. And it's a bit of a crying shame, but we'll talk about that at the end of this video. I'll probably put the time code here if you want to skip all that and just get to that point. But then we come to the crypt. Oh boy, the crypt. If you saw my launch day live stream with my friend Nate, you know of my disappointment with it, and especially Nate's disappointment with it. With this 3D crypt, where the textures haven't quite fully loaded in yet. But of this pit, a 3D fully expound and collect stuff, it sounds like it should have been amazing. But unlike all of the other crypts, unlike the crypts of yore of 3D Mortal Kombat, because the crypt got started in Deadly Alliance, the rewards are mostly randomized. They're going to be mostly augments, forge materials, if you're lucky, some resources, smash the pots to get some coins. You could get gear out of these, but because I've been through the crypt multiple times, because you could go through the crypt multiple times in this one by resetting all of the boxes, you really end up getting to a point where you find most of everything after just a couple of run-throughs. And that's it. You only get a couple of run-throughs and you find mostly everything, and everything else is just left up to chance. Especially when you consider that one of the main ways to unlock just about anything in Mortal Kombat 11's crypt, well, we're going to talk about two of the ways now, since it's actually the right time to do so, is come in here, take a left, and find this motherfucker. Find the collector. And trade stuff for stuff.
Before I steal your coins.
And I have most of the collector trade stuff already, so he's become pretty useless. Let's head up to the surface and find what everybody is talking about when it comes to the whack shit. Meantime, I'm going to summon a meteor so that it's ready for me when I get outside. See, this is pretty cool too. You can see where the meteors are coming from in the sky. You should just keep an eye on the sky. Watch for anything that's glowing. Getting bigger. I don't see anything yet. Takes a little while. There it comes. I missed it, but once you solve all of the puzzles to really fully expand the crypt and do all of the grinding necessary to get everything, it becomes a bit of a chore. The Naden Shrine. Donate between 1,000 and 100,000 coins for your specific tier of reward, be it concept art or music or skins or whatever. And just work at it. And just work at it, work at it, work at it. And if you're wondering why my coin counter isn't going down, is because Mortal Kombat 11 doesn't count coins past 7 nines. Which is a bit weird because I technically have 12 million coins. And the only way to find that out is to win coins in a fight and then see what the true amount is. But that's what the crypt becomes, friends. And it's not exactly fun. As a quick spoiler alert for the end of the year, I think Mortal Kombat 11 is actually going to be in my top 10 games that I played this year as of right now. I have the list of games that I played so far. Right now, Mortal Kombat 11 just makes it. Just makes it. There's a good chance, though, that, well, it could drop. Depending on how things go, I'm not buying in games that much at this time of year because, as a family rule, starting November 1st, don't buy anything for yourself. That's it. Just don't buy anything for yourself and then you're good. But, you know, maybe I go back and find a game that I played or that I haven't played in a while and I haven't talked about, and maybe that replaces MK11, who knows. But your standard versus mode is quite fun. you know, it's your standard single fight. Tournament I haven't messed with, but same thing. Online, I only play for Kombat League. It's okay, but it's an online mode, so treat it as you will. AI battle, this is literally just, I need to prep dinner, but I want to unlock stuff in Mortal Kombat 11. Let's go in here, run the AI battles, and do the thing. And your standard practice, fatality training, and your tutorial, which is... This is probably where Mortal Kombat 11 really shines, is its tutorials are fantastic, teaching you things about basic tutorials, your special move cancels, your crushing blows, advanced defense, frame data, positioning, resources, and character-specific lessons. And then you can take them into practice mode, which is their best to date. Basically everything that doesn't involve towers, or basically everything that isn't under Conquer, is pretty well made and actually kind of fun, including the customized menu. Now granted, again, it's more limited than Injustice 2, but in this case, I think it was actually the right call, because making the gear pieces actual things instead of, I could get duplicates of Miho Demon, and this is my 4th Sama of the Shirai Ryu mask. You know what I mean? Making that not a problem and making these single items that you have to track down and unlock, great. I wish Injustice 2 actually did that. And just as well, there are no stats. There's no stats! The only thing you can do is fuck around with augments. And these augments are automatically turned off and ranked, so that you can pick whichever Scorpion you want, as long as you make it your default loadout, and then play as the Scorpion of your choice. But this does have its flaws. Sometimes unlocking things is a pain in the ass because they made it a pain in the ass. Namely, things that have not shown up in any of the towers yet, and you're just sitting there waiting and wondering when I'm going to get the damn spear. Or, let's go to Raiden, because he's got a prime example of this. Also, they added, this wasn't at launch, they added the ability to go, what did I just unlock? Okay, cool. So that's what I literally just unlocked, the orange flash thing. That wasn't there at launch, and it's a recent addition. But anyhow, Kombat League stuff is a bit of a pain in my ass because you have to get to a certain tier. And this was kind of expected, but nonetheless, it's not exactly fun to have stuff gated off to people. At least allow us to unlock it in a different way that doesn't involve shelling out cash at the Premier Store. And we'll talk about that next, actually. But overall, the customization, while technically more limited than Injustice 2, because you don't have three tiers of ovipositors, really. You don't have rares, commons, and epics commons, rares, and epics that have very slightly different appearances to ridiculously different appearances. And really, most people gun for the epics because they're the coolest anyway. Here, everything gets a chance to shine in its own way. And everything gets to shine in its own way, and none of the gear has stats, meaning that you're not hunting down epic or legendary gear just to have stupid, ridiculous stats. There's a video that I have that I'm going to attach to the description of a Deadshot loadout I made over a year ago that had 5,000 attack, or 5,000 strength, which means 5,000 strength augmenting physical attacks, normals, combos, that sort of thing. Not special moves, but just, normals. Killing level 5 AI Captain Cold in 7 hits flat, with a back 3 that did 50% damage. That's not possible in this game, and I'm all the happier for it. Would I have minded if maybe it was 60 instead of 30? I don't know. I probably would be okay with that, but some might see that as being, whoa, that's a little bit too much. So, me personally, might be a bit too much. but maybe it'll make things more interesting, especially if they get unlocked at a steady, consistent enough rate. Having unlocked most of everything already, I'm in an interesting position to say, well, I really don't have much else to do. There isn't much else for me really to do. What else is there for me to do? Just try and grind and hopefully get better augments? Roll the dice and hopefully get some gear? Because really the main way I'm getting gear now is by hopping into specific towers and discovering these pieces of gear at random. It shouldn't be at random, folks. And then your collection. And this is where... And the collection should be a thing where you go to see stuff. Interesting how they specifically left the... Yeah, this I've not seen yet. Generic guy. Yeah, see how it's different? You can also see how fatal blows change. You can see, oh, the in-game... There was supposed to be a goddamn grenade launcher involved. Whereas just different grenades. Then the Terminator shows up, slams you into the ground, and guns you down with an assault rifle instead of what we got. Or... Let's take a look at probably my favorite example of this, Shang Tsung. You want to see what his fatal blow used to be? A couple of quick strikes, a charged soul blast to send soul energy through you to create blood spikes, and some blast of fire to turn you around, and then a shove into the spikes. This was not just, let me turn into ninjas. This would have actually been cool to see. But alas. And then you get environment concepts, story concepts, music stuff, and all of your endings. It's your typical behind-the-scenes thing. These are also a bit of a pain in the ass to unlock, particularly because I don't know where to get half of this crap. I still have none of Goro's Lair's concepts, or what have you. So that's it for gameplay. Now let's talk about some of my... let's talk about some of my real gripes. Then we'll talk about some things that I truly, honestly like about this game, and then we'll get to my final overview. There's a lot here, folks. Okay. This has very quickly become my single biggest gripe with Mortal Kombat 11. It's not the bizarre story direction, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I'm not going to actually show any. I'm probably just going to show story footage that came from trailers, and that's it. It's not the Towers of Time, feeling like, oh, there's no point in actually playing them unless I want to grab consumables, because really that's what they are. Because if I want to play Rapid Towers, oh cool, consumables, 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 consumables. Yay! Like I already didn't have enough of the fucking things. Why not give me something that I can actually use? Why not give me specific augments? Like, instead of it being random stuff and random augments, I would have loved it if it's like Terminator augment, charged outer lining, or something. But then again, when you really think about it, what else could they do? They could do skins or augments. They could do augments for your characters and certain things, but at a certain point, you're going to unlock everything for every character. I mean, the gear augment thing, it truly can just become the augments at a certain point. So there really isn't much else to do, but conversely, that kind of hurts this game a little bit. But at the same time, I don't know how you fix that without doubling the amount of gear in the game. That's really the only way I could see them doing that, and making 60 pieces of gear, as I mentioned, could make things nasty. It could have required... It would not have been possible with NetherRealm's development schedule, and that's probably the biggest thing, is that Warner Brothers' influence on this game is more apparent than ever, and people are coming around to realizing that a lot of the problems with this game are not problems that really NetherRealm imposed upon it. WB wants a NetherRealm game out every 2 years. They really, really do. But they want them to be bigger, more ambitious, and be the next biggest thing. And right now, it's working. sales-wise. Mortal Kombat 11 sold 1.8 million digital copies within its first month. That is an obscene amount of money. If we were to break that down, 1.8 million copies of a fighting game, which is a relatively obscure genre. And if every one of those 1.8 million people spent $60, they didn't. Some of them paid upwards of twice that amount. But just to lowball it and get an approximation, 1.8 million copies of a $60 game netted WB almost $115 million. That is huge. NetherRealm and WB made roughly $115 million in 1 month. Now, let's suppose that by September, where it finally got dethroned, let's say that number doubled. Let's say it's about 3.5 million sales by the end of that. 150. Now, that's double that. That's $230 million in 6 months. That's crazy. Granted, this is not Call of Duty amounts of money. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 was labeled a disappointment by Activision because it made $50 million less than the last game in 3 days. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 still made $500 million in 3 days. That's mind-blowing. And remember, Mortal Kombat 11 made, if our math is correct, about half of that in 6 months. That might make Mortal Kombat 11 sound like a relative flop, but here's what you need to understand. Mortal Kombat is a fighting game. Fighting games are a pretty obtuse genre. Not obtuse, they're relatively obscure games. It's also trying to trying to compete with these numbers. Trying to compete with Call of Duty is a little bit asinine. Trying to compare a fighting game to Call of Duty is like saying, oh, well, Shovel Knight, or like, oh, Shovel Knight's a flop. Look at Shovel Knight compared to, I don't know, Batman Arkham Knight. And even then, I'm willing to bet Shovel Knight sold more than Arkham Knight. But anyway, that point stands, right? Comparing an indie game to a AAA game, that comparison is not exactly that cut and dry because this is a AAA fighting game in the most popular fighting game franchise of all time, period. It's still NetherRealm and WB competing with a franchise that makes $500 million a year in 3 days, or $500 million in 3 days, and is considered a disappointment. Don't ask me how that is a fucking disappointment, but it is. And of course, like I said, our numbers, $115 million in the first month and $230 million by the time it gets dethroned, is assuming everybody bought the $60 version. Remember, the premium version cost upwards of, if memory serves, $110. In fact, I'm going to very quickly double check that math, just so that, I'm not accidentally talking out of my ass, you know what I mean? So, very quickly, I'm going to verify how much the Mortal Kombat 11 Premium Edition was at launch. Yeah, $120 through ebgames.ca. I know it's currently down in price because they're running some sort of really big sale where Mortal Kombat 11 is running at 40% off, which MKX did basically the same thing around this time. It's a holiday thing. Black Friday is relatively soon here, folks. So it kind of makes sense. But the base price right now for Mortal Kombat 11 Premium Edition on the PlayStation Store, once that page loads, is $90. It's actually $90. Whereas Mortal Kombat 11 itself is, I'm gonna say, is gonna be about $60 because I think it's gonna be displaying US prices. I got the Mortal Kombat Premium Edition at $130. Yeah, $60. So it's $90 for the Premium Edition, we'll say. The reason why it was $120 at EB Games is because Canada money sucks. But 90 USD, okay? That's a 50% increase in that. So that is $180 million, roughly. Approximately $180 million in a month. And then breaking $300 million in 6 months. That's a lot of money. There are movies that make less money than this. There are full-blown go-to-the-theater movies that make less money than this. And not small movies either. Obviously not like Avengers movies. Avengers movies make stupid amounts of money. Jurassic movies make stupid amounts of money. But just as an example of the kinds of money that this game makes, and I'm getting to this point, let's take a look at a recent action movie blockbuster. The Gemini Man, which just came out not too long ago. I would say Terminator Dark Fate, but if we want numbers on Terminator Dark Fate, I think we're going to have to wait until November 4th, the Monday, in order to get any decent amount of numbers. So, how much money did Gemini Man cost? Or how much money did it bring in? Its box office is, according to Box Office Mojo via IMDb, so take that for what you will, it made $149.3 million at the box office. So it broke even on its budget. It made a little bit of money. But I do mean a little bit of money, relatively speaking. Its budget was $138 million. Now, NetherRealm and WB have not, and probably will not, release the budget for Mortal Kombat 11. But it's safe to say that with game development costs, it probably wasn't cheap. I'm not going to assign any numbers to it, but it probably wasn't cheap to make. Could it have been 7 figures? Probably, but again, no figures. So, the fact that this game made almost the same amount of money that Gemini Man did, which was a relatively hyped up American action thriller because it had Will Smith, and Will Smith came out October 11th in the United States. So it had about the same amount of time. And Gemini Man, which is a Hollywood blockbuster type movie, made probably a similar amount of money in a month that Mortal Kombat 11 did. That's crazy to think about because usually nobody thinks of video games as these big crazy businesses unless you're talking about like EA and Activision and Blizzard and all of these guys. But any AAA game is going to make bank, and Mortal Kombat is no exception. And WB knows that. But the thing is that the way that they make bank causes some serious problems, and we're finally bringing it all back around. WB, as a publisher, is pretty fucking scummy. Doing things like with Arkham Origins. We're not going to patch the game because we're too busy working on DLC. No, seriously. That is actually something that they said in the past. The Arkham Knights PC version. Oh my lord. I did not play that game on PC, but oh my lord. That looked horrendous. Why, too? Why was it so horrendous on PC? Because they outsourced it to a small development team of 12 people to port Batman Arkham Knight? Arkham Knight was going to make a fuckload of money, WB. You could have afforded that. But no, it's all about cutting costs where you can, and then making and then carving content out of games in order to make money. Arkham Knight had a 6-month had a season pass that lasted 6 months. And what was in that? Story-based villain stuff. Story-based villain stuff. We had challenge maps and the Season of Infamy and, well, skins and things. Would have been nice to actually unlock these things, but I'm less of a stickler about that sort of thing than others are. But truly, imagine this, okay? With if we're going to compare it to Mortal Kombat 11, all right? Let's say Mortal Kombat 11 launches with a story mode, the launch Towers of Time, which they've added more towers and free updates. 3 of the 5 classic towers, and maybe the crypt doesn't even exist. Okay? That's what's happening in Conquer mode. Your online exists, tournament exists, local exists, and maybe AI battle doesn't exist either. We'll just say that. AI battle doesn't exist and crypt doesn't exist. Story mode exists. Towers of Time exists, but it's at its launch state with probably about half of the towers and half of the rewards that we've seen. Classic towers are missing a couple. Let's say Survivor and Endless are missing, and the crypt doesn't exist. Now imagine if before the game comes out, we'll call it the what am I going to call this one? I don't want to call it the Combat Pack because that's for DLC characters as such. But let's call it the Kamidogu pack, because the Kamidogu are for each of the realms and is a cute little lore thing. So let's say every month represents a Kamidogu. Let's say Earth Realm. The Earth Realm Kamidogu is up first. And that gives us, we'll say that gives us Nightwolf as a character. But it also gives us towers to play through, and maybe gives us the other 2 classic towers. But you've got to pay for those. Because if you don't pay, you don't get that. Remarkably, NetherRealm has managed to avoid much of WB's more scummy ways. Not to say that some of those scummy ways got in there. Looking at you, microtransactions. But somehow or another, Mortal Kombat 11 came out pretty feature complete for a WB game. How it managed that, how the guys at NetherRealm managed to be like, here is how we're going to release our game and do that, and the most amount of content that's going to be carved out is going to be characters. How they managed that and didn't end up being to the point where whole modes and pieces of modes didn't get chopped out like Arkham Knight? I'll never know. That must be some sort of agreement that they have going on over there. But now we can talk about this, because this may be how they got away with it. Microtransactions are in Mortal Kombat, and it's fucking bullshit. I used to defend microtransactions, believe it or not, but now I don't. Now I really, really, really don't. The only nice thing is that it says purchased, but that's a bit of a misnomer. I unlocked all of these intros. I unlocked both of these things. I unlocked Hunted Soul, I unlocked Mega Dune, I unlocked every single one of these things in both of these bundles. The only reason why I don't have 5,000 time crystals and why I've spent them to begin with is because sometimes there are items that show up in these bundles that I've not had. I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to get them, so I may as well. Now, the logical conclusion to that is that, did you actually spend money on microtransactions and say you hated them? Actually, I didn't. And this is the only reason why I am not absolutely livid, just mostly livid, that this exists. That I could go in here and spend $53.49 Canadian, that's $49.99 American for you guys, in the United States, to get 5,600 time crystals. Yeah. Oh. Then you might be wondering, then for those of you who are watching from the outside and don't understand, well, wait a minute, how do you have approximately, how did you say you had almost 4,000 source crystals, which would have been probably about, according to this game's logic, yeah, this would probably be pretty good. Then how did you have about $50 worth of time crystals without spending any money on this game? Did they come as a pre-order bonus or what? No time crystals in the pre-order bonus. Sometimes time crystals, you get a relative pittance of 10 time crystals every time you level up. So I've gotten 800. What is my rank? 80, yeah, so I got about 800 time crystals that way. But that's a pittance. The gauntlet, I think is about every 10 stages, gives you 200 time crystals. Trying to remember if any of the other towers do. I don't think so. I don't think they give you time crystals, but the main way I've gotten most of my time crystals is, if memory serves, I think you get some of them in the story mode too, but I honestly don't remember a damn thing about story mode as far as unlocks go outside of gear. But here's where else I got a large portion of my time crystals. Online play. Specifically in the Seasons of Time. In the Kombat League. Now, I'm not too sure, but I think you can, I'm not too sure, so don't quote me on this, but it might be possible to get time crystals if you play enough ranked sets to kind of get a streak going, and then, like, online play rewards, because I've gotten coins, I've gotten souls, I have gotten time crystals, and easy fatality tokens through this method. A lot of easy fatality tokens. Over 1,000 of them. And these easy fatality tokens used to only be purchasable through direct money. In Mortal Kombat X, you could only buy 30, or a pack of 5 or a pack of 30 for $5 or $15 for easy fatality tokens, and that was it. But now you can actually unlock them in game, same with skip fights and gear level up tokens. No need for that. I'll be right back to buy them, and I'll be right back. But if you're feeling particularly impatient, you can buy them too. The fact that this isn't even an option is ridiculous. Oh, and the original premium shop was garbage. Half of these options were gone. You could buy one intro, one gear, one skin, maybe one brutality, and here are 3 different versions of easy fatality tokens, which initially took up their own slots. But at the very least, you could also unlock them through gameplay. However, the fact that it's even an option to be able to spend real money in a $60 to $90 game in order to skip the grind is fucking stupid. And I hate that this is actually a thing. And I hate that I used to defend this fucking shit back when it was even worse than Injustice 2. I just mad at myself for that. But that's in the past, and people can change, so that's a good thing. That I've learned that, at least. Now we can actually talk about story. Overall, the story, me and my buddy are not at all pro players. Not at all. Hardly are we pros, but we can play pretty competently. And what do you know? We beat the story mode in 3 hours. 3 hours! It would take me 8 hours to beat the story mode of Mortal Kombat 9. It had 16 chapters. Alright? And particularly difficult fights at the end with Shao Kahn, but that's besides the point. Mortal Kombat X was about 4 or 5 hours, depending on how things went. Injustice 1 was about 6 hours. And Mortal Kombat and Injustice 2 was about the same length as MKX. 4 or 5 hours. But I'm not sure if you noticed, but while there are 12 chapters and different splits of fights and technically 3 endings, as I said, 3 hours. The cutscenes were shorter than all the others, and me and my friend blasted through this shit. And we've died a couple of times, and we've died several times throughout the story, and it took us 3 hours. And when I look back on it, it feels like, to me anyway, that the story for Mortal Kombat 11 got cut in half. There was this whole setup with Shinnok and everything that never panned through. We had weird detours and odd things to try and mash everything together. It just didn't sit right. Something went wrong. And whatever went wrong, to cut the story short, it felt really brief. And it felt like we were missing some stuff in the story. And this leads me to wonder if it's true that the story was cut in half to save time. Because there's rumors that that's a thing. I use the term rumors loosely. Not because it's unbelievable, but because, well, I have my reasons. However, there's another thing that I feel like this story didn't do right. Unlike every other story mode to date, there isn't an end game unlock. You don't even have to play a third of the story to get the story mode unlock. That story mode unlock, who is also purchasable if you want to skip the grind, is Frost. By completing Chapter 4, you unlock Frost. She's the earliest unlock in the entirety of the NetherRealm story. Brainiac was at the end of Injustice 2. Nobody was unlockable in Injustice 1. Mortal Kombat X would let you unlock Shinnok in the story mode, unless through a glitch you redeemed your Samurai skin pack and basically unlocked Shinnok without playing the game. But that was a glitch more than anything. And I know that's a glitch because I actually did that. But Mortal Kombat 9 not only had a character unlock relatively late in the story, but not at the end. In Cyber Sub-Zero, Quan Chi was unlocked by beating the story mode in its entirety. That was 2 characters you had to unlock. And now imagine, if you will, Shinnok and Mileena were supposed to be playable characters. And one of the rumors was that Shinnok was supposed to be unlockable. Imagine this, if you will. Frost is unlockable at Chapter 4. Mileena unlocks at Chapter 7. Shinnok unlocks in Chapter 11. And maybe in Chapter 12, you unlock the ability to play as Fire God Liu Kang in single fights and towers only. Fire God Liu Kang would not be playable online or in multiplayer elements, but he would be playable in all of the other elements should you choose to play as Fire God Liu Kang. Maybe this was their plan. Maybe every 3 or 4 chapters you were supposed to unlock a character, with maybe Fire God Liu Kang being unlockable. I can't say for sure. But it's interesting to know that technically Fire God Liu Kang is a different character, with different moves, that is not playable outside of Chapter 12, End of an Era. You can fight him, however, in the DLC character-specific towers, in a DLC character-specific tower. I don't have any footage of it, but essentially if you go to the Towers of Time and go to the Premier Towers and go and play through the character when they come out, there's a tower where you have to beat a character who has a buff, to take their buff and keep climbing until you got to Fire God Liu Kang, and using all of your buffs, beat Fire God Liu Kang with your buffs. So why didn't they make him unlockable? I don't know. Maybe they never intended on him being unlockable. I can't say for sure. But the fact that the only unlockable we got was in Chapter 4, when every other one had some sort of reward for beating the actual story mode, is just one of the many disappointments that I and many others have with the story mode. But I feel like the story mode has had its moments that don't make it complete trash and make it at least passable. But its problems have had come to light before. I'm talking about specific moments here. Chapter 1 as a whole was probably its best chapter. Both Nate and I were gobsmacked when Sonya died. We didn't see it coming. The Timequake sequence was pretty neat. Shaolin Monks was cute. Basically, the first 4 chapters worked out okay, for the most part. But it starts to fall apart fast. And really, the only really good part after the Fire and Ice segments was a certain point in Chapter 11, cutting the strings, which involves Liu Kang and Raiden. That's really it. Everything else was ranged from alright to really? for various whatever reasons. And some people will like some of these sequences more than others, but truly, the story mode rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And probably my final major gripe with Mortal Kombat 11 already got its own segment. That's really, the Towers of Time don't feel replayable. It might just be because I've unlocked most of the things, but honestly, I don't feel the pull to play more of the Towers of Time other than to just grab some gear level up tokens or try my luck for augments and keeping up with the race against time. And really, just to get to the 10th percentile, I've completed 6 towers, and it's been over a day and a half since it started. I'm already in the top 26%, and I can hold that spot for the next 4 days and be fine. Oh, I remember what my final gripe was. The fighting itself is my smallest gripe with this game, because the fighting overall is really solid and every character feels at least a little bit viable in some way, shape, or form, and it's quite nice to be able to pick and choose from multiple different characters. But I think one of the biggest issues with Mortal Kombat 11 is how they decide to implement the tournament variation. I think one of my biggest gripes with the fighting is that overall it's fun and it has its moments, but again, it feels a little bit flat. And some people would say, well, Mortal Kombat X was broke. But it was fun. I mean, I could lab all day and have at least some level of fun with some of these characters, with the characters in Mortal Kombat X. And while I always have a blast playing as Kotal Khan and just smashing people with my big freaking sword and going in with Nightwolf, ordinarily, I would have bounced around the cast a hell of a lot more. It took me almost a month to gravitate towards Kotal Khan. And once I gravitated towards Kotal Khan, he was my main until Nightwolf dropped. I've never had a steady, singular main for that long. Granted, of course, I also played Scorpion and Sub-Zero very early on, but I don't know. They were around for a little bit, yes, but it's really Kotal Kombat I then stuck with. Which was weird because usually I'm like, oh, I feel like I want to play Raiden. No, wait, I want to try Baraka. Nice. Let's see what Geras can do. But I never had the pull to play with a lot of these characters, especially characters I liked. I like Kitana, Eric Black. Where did he go? I lost my luster for Sub-Zero, for fuck's sakes. Only recently I've gotten an interest in Raiden. That's just because I found the fun stuff I could do with a particular move called Storm Cell, which is a combo extender. And for me, combos don't necessarily make a game, but combo artistry is really, really fun. It's nice to see how people optimize and break down and go for swaggy shit or whatever. But Mortal Kombat 11 doesn't allow for a lot of swag. It's a very to the point, honed in game. And some people are not too big on that. Me personally, because this is my thoughts, I kind of think that, but not to the same degree. Scarlet and Baraka for when he was around, and Raiden, and even a little bit of Cetrion. But I had more fun with Injustice 2, playing as Black Canary, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Blue Beetle, Batman, Superman, let's see, Raiden, Sub-Zero, messing around with Donatello, and a large portion of the cast I had a lot of fun with. Mortal Kombat X, the last Mortal Kombat game before this one. I probably played every single character at least 100 times. I could check the records to be sure, too. But let me just list off all of the characters that I actually had a shitload of fun playing in Mortal Kombat X. Predator, Alien, Leatherface. We haven't even gotten to Mortal Kombat characters yet. Jason for a little while. Sub-Zero, Raiden, Kotal Khan, Ferritor, Kitana, Scorpion, Kun-Jin, Tremor, Triborg, Boraicho. I had a lot of fun with a lot of these characters. Here, there's about half a dozen characters that I actually enjoy playing, and that just feels sad. But now it's time for the fun parts. Time for the positivity. And quite frankly, this game has its positive moments. And where do we get our positive moments from? Let's start with the tutorial. If you want to really learn how to play Mortal Kombat, this is the way to do it. This is probably the best tutorial that they've had, and it's the most informative. You play through this, you get the feeling for it, and it is very informative. Oh yeah, and I forgot, you can also get time crystals through the tutorial, so there's a reward path for you right there. Fatality training! You just want to watch fatalities? Are you a sick fuck who wants to watch somebody get their heart torn out? This is where you go. And you can unlock fatalities by doing their inputs if you happen to have a good enough internet connection. You don't have to unlock them. Wait, anyway. Practice is actually quite fun. This is a very detailed practice mode with frame data and situational setups. It's the most detailed practice mode to date, which allows you to really hone in if you really want to get good. But what if you don't want to get good? What if you don't want to be tournament level? What if you're not a big fan of playing online? What if you want this to be a party game? What if you want this to be a game where you and your buddies come out and play? Local, you go to local, you set up your characters, you're good to go. The fighting feels great in this game. And that's kind of important that they nailed the fighting, and they, quite frankly, did. Is the style the best way to go about it? Maybe not. But it's definitely fun to play, at least for me. And despite my gripes, the towers can be replayable. You can actually go into the towers and replay them. The rewards kind of stink once you get to my point, but if you don't play as often as I do, well, shit, you got stuff to unlock on a regular basis. Excuse me. I would have wished that the Holiday Towers got their own slot, though. And let's not forget. Let us not forget, of course, character customization. Character customization is one of the best things in fighting games. And allowing yourself to build your perfect Noob Saibot or Scarlet or Cabal or Shao Kahn is just a blast. I mean, look, let's take a look at Shao Kahn as an example. Here are the different versions of Shao Kahn I got going here. We got basically MK11 Shao Kahn with a nicer lance. We got big purple Shao Kahn with the gem hammer. Big spooky monster Shao Kahn with jaw hammers. A rock hammer, and a big scary thing with horns, and that's just what I have. You have other hammers, like this fucking thing. Or if you like the oncoming storm style with ribs attached, or if you're a big fan of goofs, there's a kind of a funny one here too. It's not as wide as Injustice, but there's still a lot that you can customize. And that is not a bad thing at all. But I think one of the big things that Mortal Kombat 11 does wrong is something I need to talk about in my final thoughts. Mortal Kombat 11. Now, if you skipped to this point in the video, I can't blame you. There was a lot I had to talk about, so here's essentially the TLDR of the whole thing. Mortal Kombat 11 is fantastic, and one thing I did forget to talk about is a lot of cute little secrets that they hide in here. Ninjas falling off of the bridge of the crypt, and costume-specific animations for at least Johnny Cage. See the mime thing? Which that only happens with the Ninja Mime costume. It does not happen with any other costume. Every other costume, it just goes straight into Punch, which is kind of neat. And the references, and there's stuff to like here that I didn't get into. Some of the references, gameplay, and customization. But this is probably the most flawed Mortal Kombat in a long time. When you really break it down, this is probably the most flawed Mortal Kombat to date. And 6 months of changes, adding new towers, adding new characters, making things easier on people when it comes to the grind. They have definitely helped this game. But I don't know if I'll be singing the same tune a year on. I can't say for sure how many changes are going to be coming to this game by April 2020. And if those changes that we're going to be seeing, that are going to be coming with Spawn, with Joker, with Sindel, are going to be enough to keep this game, to make this game go from crap to tolerable to good. Because right now, it's at that second step. It's tolerable. I have my fun with it, and generally, in my opinion, I think people would find this game tolerable. But something that but there is one final flaw. But this is a flaw that it shares with Injustice 2, so it's not new. It's that your equipment is stocked to your account. So it's not stocked to your system, it's stocked to your account. So my account has all of this, but a guest account on the same PS4 will not have access to the same gear. And that is frustrating, because that's also true for Injustice 2, and they should have made a way to do that. Let guests on my console, if I bring it to a party, I want everybody to be able to make their to make their own crazy red Sub-Zero, or I don't know, a Sub-Zero who decided it's fucking Earth Day and decided to bring a green axe to the fight. I don't know. But at least there would be options there. And for whatever reason, I'm trying to find one with a green axe here. Hold on. Even though green's not my favorite color. There it is. Even though that is another flaw, I'm not necessarily going to use it to ding this game. Well, I will use it to ding the game, but not by much. I would use it to ding Injustice 2 as well. So that's why I didn't talk about it until this particular point in the video. But overall speaking, Mortal Kombat 11, as it stands, 6 months later, has gone from, in my opinion, a 5 out of 10. In my opinion, I could find Mortal Kombat 11 tolerable, but most people, I can see why they would find it to be a 3. Now, I think is a 6.5 out of 10. And most people would find it to be a 5 or a 6 out of 10 now. I would think. And hopefully it continues to climb and be better. But I really don't know if due to how things are with the current climate of the Mortal Kombat fandom and how people looked at this game at launch, or how many people find flaws in it, or what have you, I don't know if it's going to make this one a particular favorite. And AAA scummery through WB, I'm afraid is probably going to stick around, because WB owns NetherRealm. It's not quite the same situation as Bungie, who had a contract with Activision for Destiny, and then Bungie managed to break it off early. Could NetherRealm break from WB and be on its own? Yeah, in theory, but it would be fucking difficult. And they would lose out on a lot of the deals that have helped make Mortal Kombat more popular than ever. They would lose out on doing guest deals. They'd lose out on being able to do guest character deals with things like the Terminator or Alien or Predator. Some people would see that as a plus. I personally would see that as a minus, because guest characters, generally speaking, can be good as long as they're not on the main roster in Tekken 7. But overall, that's my feelings for the game. It's definitely trying to improve, but there's just so much that taints Mortal Kombat 11 that it's kind of hard to... It's kind of one of the harder things to think about and really talk about. And what I might do as a sort of continuation of this game is, if I can get enough people to kind of come in and voice their opinions, I might do a sort of super review, or me and maybe upwards of half a dozen others could do that. Don't hold me to it though, but I'm going to see if I can make something like that work. I hope you enjoyed me talking about Mortal Kombat 11 and giving my thoughts. I'd love to know what you guys think. Do you guys think it's better than I say it is, or are you of the mindset that, man, you're cutting this game too much slack? This game sucks. Well, tell me why. Tell me more. And don't forget to be awesome, guys, and of course, I'll see you guys on the other side.